Certainly not named it Sam. In our house, because of Christ, we serve that. We can be the light and stuff, so I'm simply smoking. You know, we learned that on Sunday. Sound check for Diane. You want to? Well, it just it. It well, but it can be. You want to try it?
That's what I associate with these. Yeah. Okay, hold on. It's, yeah, that's what I, much better than the,
Almost fits inside your.
so it should,
There you go. That's it.
is it?
Yeah.
Okay, and we're, that sounds good.
That does sound good.
Yes?
Yeah. Hands up in the back.
Excellent. Is it,
Well, actually,
well, but for now, I want to turn this off.
does this have a means? You this switch right here. Mute.
Good morning. I think we're still working on sound a little bit. We wanted to start our morning, and I was a little worried that I was going to have to tame the very enthusiastic crowd, but you quieted so quickly. We wanted to start this day with an opportunity for quiet and prayer and contemplation. And part of the way we are doing that is using a prayer that's called Taizé. And Taizé, Luther said that to sing is to pray twice. And so we are singing our prayer this morning. And we're doing that a cappella, which means that for all of you who are choral leaders, we are trusting that you will hold us in song as the rest of us sing, perhaps making a joyful noise. So I invite you to turn to the second page of your packet, and we will begin with a meditative prayer, Lord, listen to your children praying. And please notice that with these different pieces, we are singing verses 3 times. And the idea is that initially you just get your bearings on the song, and with the following verses, then the prayer flows from you into the community. Lord, listen to your children praying. Lord, send your Spirit in this place. Lord, listen to your children praying. Send us love, send us power, send us grace. Lord, listen to your children praying. Lord, send your Spirit in this place. Lord, listen to your children praying. Send us love, send us power, send us satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, O God. Praise to the blessed and holy Trinity, one God who gives us life, salvation, and resurrection. Listen, listen, be open, O my heart. Listen, listen, be open, O my heart. Listen, listen, be open, O my heart. Learn from Jesus, be open, O my heart. Learn from Jesus, be open, O my heart. Learn from Jesus, be open, O my heart. Grace abounding, be open, O my heart. Grace abounding, be open, O my heart. Grace abounding, be open, O my heart. A reading from Luke's Gospel. When Jesus was at the table with the 2 disciples at Emmaus, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" You have been born anew through the living and abiding Word of God. We open to hymn 7. Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, save that thou art the sun, both by day and by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence The Lord be with you. Let us pray. And you will notice that there is space in the ellipses during the special prayers for you to lift up your own individual prayers and name them. Mighty God of mercy, we thank you for the resurrection dawn, bringing the glory of our risen Lord who makes every day new. Especially we thank you for the sustaining goodness of your creation.
For bringing good, clean air to breathe.
For the new creation in Christ and all gifts of healing and forgiveness.
For the sustaining presence of your Spirit.
For the gifts of relationship with others.
For family and for siblings.
For the gift of Millis Snyder.
For the communion of faith in your church.
For the joy of singing.
For your one body.
For our pastors in our church. For our companion synod in Tanzania.
Almighty and everlasting God, you have brought us in safety to this new day. Preserve us with your mighty power, that we may not fall into sin nor be overcome in adversity. In all we do, direct us to the fulfilling of your purpose. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial, and deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. The peace of Christ be with you always.
Well, good morning, St. Mark's. It's wonderful to be together here in our precious building that has plumbing, our precious building that does not have plumbing that is working today. And we were surprised yesterday by this nasty business, but that's just the truth. So, as you walk out of the room here, turn left and you'll see a door over on this side that says Parish House. And that's your exit through a little atrium area, through a second door, and then on the sidewalk to the left over to our wonderful house on 25th Avenue. And there is a bathroom just immediately in the back door and also one upstairs. So We're going to get to know one another, perhaps in lines today, but that will be all right. Well, on behalf of the vocation planning team, Tom Falquist and Jane Summers, myself and our pastors, Edwin and Lori and Kate, we welcome you to this third guest speaker event in the 4 years of our vocation grant. We have had a wonderful season of learning together during these 4 years, and we're very glad to have Diane Millis with us to take us on the next journey. Diane is a speaker, a coach, an author, a spiritual director, and an academic, all vocations and roles she's filled for many years now. She's also an author. Dr. Millis is a PhD graduate from the University of Minnesota School of Education, and in addition to her other callings, has served as an organizational consultant and founder of Companions on a Journey, an organization founded to introduce people to contemplative practices for dialogue and to increase their capacity, that is our capacity, to notice and name what is sacred in our lives. Those of you who have been listening closely to the local and statewide and national and international conversation know that many people are hurting these days, wondering deeply about purpose in life, purpose for their lives, and whether there is any sense at all to what feels often like chaos. It's an unprecedented time of war up close, of loss and reorganization, and a yearning for hope itself. To know our own stories, to be curious about others' stories, is the desperately needed and fertile path toward redefinition of what it means for us to be in world community, to be for one another. This is an extraordinary opportunity for us as the church, called into being by a benevolent God and our Savior Jesus, as people of the way, a path, the way of creation, the way of the cross, and the way of resurrection, and ultimate, deep, abiding trust in God. Diane Millis is perfectly prepared to help us think through what this means in our lives, particularly as we both listen and speak. During her time with us, Diane's going to focus on the topic of her third book, Recreating a Life, and help us learn how to tell and share our most life-giving stories. More importantly, and here I'm thinking of those of you in our new small groups, she will help us listen into speech one another's stories. Did you catch that? What a wonderful locution. To listen someone into their own speaking. To be listened to. What a gift. To listen another into their story, an even greater gift. And we can give it as we learn better about how to listen. Dr. Millis, Diane, we are so glad to welcome you to our community. We think we live in the best part of the world. So we hope you see it all. And the part that you don't see, be sure and look at the window of your airplane as you head west tomorrow. Welcome.
Ah, yes.
And Randy, you're going to manage her sound for her, right?
I think that sounds wonderful. What's going to happen, Randy, is I'm going to get excited about what I'm sharing, and my volume is probably going to go up. So I'll just forewarn you. Welcome, everyone. I want to begin by saying thank you. Thank you for sharing your Saturday with us. My hope is we are all going to receive a gift, and it's a gift that we're giving one another through the Spirit. Our God's a giver, and as such, we are called to give and to receive. So that's my hope for us today. Thank you for being here. The lovely place I was staying at downtown, there was a big lineup with T-shirts on for the game, the big game. So I know you had other choices of many other ways to focus on this Saturday, but I'm very glad that you're here today with us. So here's the big reveal. You all, I think as you started on this project, maybe some of you, maybe all of you, began to explore this theme of God calling, God's call. This ongoing intimacy we have with the divine. And so we're going to dig a little bit deeper into this topic of listen, God is calling. And in fact, if I wrote this book, mine would say, look, listen, linger. Now, I'll confess, I like alliteration. So let me just leave you with those three words. Look, listen, linger. Our God is a God of love who's inviting us into relationship. And it's through our senses, both the five and the deeper sense within, that we look and see God at work in our lives. We listen deeply and hear the voice of God, which is often a still small voice, but sometimes maybe a little louder to make sure that God gets our attention. And then perhaps in our modern day, the lingering is the most important thing, because we live at a pace, whether we're followers of Christ or not, this culture pushes us to live at a pace which doesn't allow much opportunity for lingering. So I think this path, this way of life of following Jesus is one of intentionally lingering, because that's where we begin to metabolize, make meaning of what we're seeing and what we're hearing, and noticing what remains within us. That's, I think, the best way we discern God's call. Looking, listening, lingering. So those are going to be the practices we'll explore today. This is indeed one of my favorite topics to speak about. And so I'm delighted at the enthusiasm I heard from some of you. I'm going to offer some confessional moments today. I will share some of my story, not because it's all about me, but I think in order for us to entrust our stories to one another, somebody has to risk being vulnerable first. So I'm going to risk being vulnerable first with an appropriate amount of vulnerability so that it may increase your sense of trust and being willing to be a little bit more vulnerable in exploring your own story and God in it. As Martin said, boy, we're in a time, even when I think we were originally scheduled to meet late February, the world has changed over and over again since then. There's a leadership consultant, Bob Johansson, whose book, Leaders Make the Future, and he refers to our world as a VUCA world. Maybe some of you have heard this. The acronym VUCA, V-U-C-A. It's volatile. Would you agree? Yeah. It's uncertain. Oh my gosh, yes. It's complex, and it's ambiguous. The way to respond is not often clear, and so it's imperative that for we who are followers of Christ, we who are believers, that we have this way of life, which is referred to as discernment, in order to navigate what I would argue is an increasingly VUCA world. He wrote this book back in 2012. If he was referring to our lives as VUCA then, this was pre-pandemic, this was pre-so many things. I think we're now almost VUCA on steroids. So I'm so glad we're here as a community learning together how to navigate. And although there's a collective calling to be a community of discernment, there's also a personal calling to each one of us. And so another theme I want to underscore, another invitation I want to underscore today is I'm going to offer you some guiding principles from our wonderful tradition. And I'm also going to implore you, it's not just only how to discern and what the tradition teaches. It's the invitation to notice how you discern. So each of us is going to draw upon these practices in a particular way. So give yourself permission to experiment with that. I'm going to, as I talk about these, notice which of these practices you've been relying on as you follow, as you look and listen and linger with God's voice in your life. All right? So it's both a how-to, but as importantly, if not more importantly, it's about how you. Yes? Does that sound kind of fascinating? I hope. I hope. I hope. All right, friends, here we go. So yes, we're in this world and in this pace, and we often feel as if we don't have time to breathe deeply, right? We know that our limbic systems often can get dysregulated. It's hard to breathe deeply. And so it's all the more important that we set up a practice. If the Spirit is in the breath, the practice of the breath is probably one of the most imperative practices. So I'm going to invite us, we just had some lovely time entering into prayer and song, which song helps to regulate the breath, probably like no other activity. However, I'd like us to just pause here for a moment. Let's get if you're able to, please, just put both of your feet on the ground, just so we're grounded in this moment. Because we're always invited, the call is always to meet this moment in God. God is always here to meet us. Are we here to meet God? So let's ground in this moment. Let's begin by setting down, noting we can always pick it up, but let's set down whatever concerns maybe need to be set by our side. We've got the plumbers here who we pray for their work. We need to just set that down if possible for our day. You all are holding many concerns, I'm sure, or some concerns. And so I just ask you if you could just set those down for now, knowing that they can be picked up as needed. So let's just start, if you're able, to just notice your breath. And in whatever way you are able, to just take a breath in and a breath out as you let go. And as you're ready, I'm going to invite you, extend a second invitation, which is to center in the moment, especially this occasion, this place, and this community in which we gather. What God has given us is this moment, and let's center ourselves in it. And if you find it helpful, I'll just ask you could turn up your hands if they're resting in your lap, just to center and receive this moment. What a gift to share this moment together. As you're ready, I'm going to extend the third and closing invitation of this opening meditation, which is to set an intention or notice the hope, notice the prayer in your heart that you bring today. You chose to share your Saturday with us, and what's your hope? What are you asking God for? And if that's not clear at this moment, that's perfectly all right. Just kind of notice how maybe something arises within you. My hope is that I'm given the words that are most needed for this community this day. That's my intention in being with you. Now, before I move to our next slide, I'd just like to offer you this 1, 2, 3. As I tell folks, this travels well in any container, small bag, backpack, suitcase. Even if you have no receptacle to put it in, this travels well. This is a practice that you can draw upon anywhere and everywhere. You're about to make a phone call, 3 breaths. You're about to respond to an email. You're going to go pick up your child at school. These 3 breaths of the letting go, the centering in the moment, and then really asking yourself, how do I want to show up? What's my intention? So it can be as short or as long as time permits. But it's a way of preparing ourselves to fully meet the moment, to be better equipped to look, listen, and linger. Did you notice a shift after those 3? A little more here? Okay, today we're going to talk about a word many of you may have heard. It can be defined there in just a moment, and I'm going to show you some examples of books. It's a widely written about topic of concern to us as Christians. I find it endlessly fascinating because as I move through life, I learn more and more about how I discern. And so that's my hope for you today. But let's begin. The teacher in me needs to kind of set up some definitions. So I'm assuming I got a lot of good students in the room. And so let's just start with a definition, all right? I'm going to impress you that one of the only Greek words I know is diakrisis. And this is the word from which discernment stems. Diakrisis won't be on the exam. I just want to assure you, discernment will. Discernment is both a gift we're given by our God, and it's also a way of being. It's a stance in life. And it's a stance in life that is always trying to increase awareness of and responsiveness to the presence of God. Increase awareness of, this is kind of the seeing dimension here, and responsiveness to, this is the deep listening dimension. The presence of God in our lives. So as we do that, we're sifting through, sorting out, learning to distinguish what's of God and what's not of God. There's all kinds of voices in our midst. And when I think of one of the original authors on this theme of discernment, St. Ignatius of Loyola, who lived in the 16th century around the time our friend Luther did. There were a lot of voices, a lot of noise in their lives. And our lives have even more. So it's all the more imperative we're sifting through, sorting out, distinguishing what's the voice of love and what are the voices that limit love. Are we good with the definition here? What's more important now is to explore the implications of discernment. Okay, I just did a quick, fun little search. I typed in discernment, and this is just a handful of books that came up. I didn't get a frequency count of how many have been written. I can only imagine maybe some of our folks in the room may have studied this in terms of how much literature there are. I'm sure there are hundreds of titles, if not more. But here's just a smattering. And I'm not endorsing any of these books necessarily. I just wanted you to see how this theme is addressed. And I want to start with a story. I want to start with a story of when this 60-year-old woman was 17. And I purchased one of these books. Not one exactly, but it was one entitled How to Discern the Will of God for Your Life. Let me just repeat it in case you missed it. How to discern the will of God for your life. This sounds like what a person of any age would want to know, and especially, well, maybe not. I'm going to follow you in your skepticism in just a moment, Pastor Lori. You're already ahead of me. Just wait, I'll catch up. But at 17, I don't know about you at 17, I really was looking for a blueprint. You know, if there could have been some kind of master plan, God, could you give it to me now? Show me what to do, how to do it, map it out. I wanted that divine blueprint, and I wanted from 17 to 60 and beyond, whatever my life will consist of. Give me the blueprint. Show me what to do, how to do it, with whom to meet. I wanted the blueprint, and that's what I assumed this book held. It wasn't a very thick book in terms of how to discern the will of God for my life. So I traveled. I was living in Phoenix at the time, and I traveled home. My home is in Minnesota for Christmas. And I brought the book along because I thought, what a wonderful season to discern the will of God in my life. I may have this hammered down by the new year, and then I can live into it, right? And so, anyway, I remember each evening at the end of the day, opening up a few pages and just anticipating the promise it held. It was very exciting to me. But I only had the time at the end of the day. Okay, so I got a few pages in, headed back to Arizona, opened up my suitcase to pick this up so that I could achieve this by the first of the year. Is my personality showing? I hope it's showing. And lo and behold, do you know where this story is going? The book wasn't there. But yeah, I got the lesson, but my interpretation through my 70-year-old mind is, there's a word I would use now, but I'll just say, oh my gosh. I didn't think it's not that God didn't have a plan for me, but I thought I'm not going to be able to figure it out now. I don't have the book. And perhaps that's part of the reason I'm so motivated to share this topic with you, because I've always been fascinated since having lost that book and not knowing whatever wisdom it promised me. In any event, my 60-year-old self, and maybe even my 30-something-year-old self, I began to see maybe it isn't about a divine blueprint. And I don't know, if I ask those of you in the room, I won't ask you. I'll just ask you to answer inside your heart. If you had the opportunity to receive a divine blueprint, would you want it? Okay, I'm already seeing some. Some are very clear. No, thank you. No, thank you. It actually defies one of the primary theological assumptions in our tradition of free will, doesn't it? It also defies the very essence of our God, who is so intimate and so relational. And if he just kind of, if our God just handed off some blueprint, it would be easy to just not be in this kind of intimate relationship with our God, which is the very nature of our God, this moment-to-moment intimacy. You know, it would be like getting married. I've been married now 36 years. It'd be like getting married and my husband saying, okay, here's the way our marriage is going to go for the next 36 years, rather than us co-creating our love. You know this Love Languages book? How many of you know this? It's like, yeah, we're working out with God our love languages, our way of being intimate with God. And so, just like Pastor Lori suspected, this is, I don't think, the ideal thing to receive the divine blueprint. So I have no divine blueprints to offer any of you. All I have is an invitation for you to pay attention in the moment. And we're going to explore how we might do that, how each of us might do that. Okay. How do we do that? Well, I believe firmly, one of my own personal assumptions is, we can't do it alone. We can't do it alone. If we could, Jesus would never have invited disciples, apostles to follow him. He would have went out and did his own gig, right? But he knew that he couldn't follow the love of his father, parent, Abba, on his own, that we need a community. And I firmly believe we need a community, and a community can be one other person. Hopefully it's far more than one. In my work as a spiritual director, I tend to be a part of someone's community as they're looking, listening, and lingering with how God is in relationship with them and inviting them into deeper relationship. Let's face it, folks, there's just a lot of things we don't know about ourselves. Isn't it true? There are aspects of ourselves we are blind to, and we often think it's the negative stuff we're blind to. But actually, what I notice in my work with people is they're often blind to their beauty. I've never met with a directee who is doing such awful things and so immersed in evil. I'm usually working with folks who are just trying their darndest to stay true and good and beautiful and responsive in the midst of the very real challenges of their life. And if anything, all I want to do is just hold up a mirror and say, can you see your goodness? Can you see how much you aspire to be truthful? Can you see how beautiful you are? And so as we meet in groups, as we meet in community, I hope, if anything, just to offer you that image of you're holding up a mirror so that people can see reflected how much they desire goodness, truth, and beauty. Most people, when they look in the mirror, they're not seeing that in themselves. They're not seeing how beloved they are. So we need a community, if anything, to hold up a mirror. So that's part of what we're going to be doing for one another today, is holding up that mirror. Okay, this is the most technical slide that you will have all weekend from me. What I wanted to do is I wanted to provide you, as a teacher, I'm all about resourcing. And so one of the books, I work a lot in spiritual direction training programs and with ongoing formation of spiritual directors. And this is probably the first book recommended by folks. So if you want one book, unlike the slide that had all the others I just drew at random, if you are interested in this topic and want to go deeper, I call your attention to the work of Elizabeth Liebert and her book, The Way of Discernment, where she talks about a number of spiritual practices for decision making. So discernment is the way of being, and then decision making is often the way it gets implemented in regards to something specific in our lives. I'm going to say a bit about these, but I don't want this to feel too lecture-like. I think you're going to notice how these show up throughout the day. But if we think about this, I want to animate this a bit. Think about this as a Ferris wheel, right? How many of you, I really dug Ferris wheels. I'm not as keen about them at my age now, but I dug them. You know, you get on, and then you slowly, as people are getting loaded on, right? You move about, and then it starts moving. And so I think these practices are very much that way. That sometimes you'll enter into one bucket. Let me start with one bucket at the bottom right now. And these are maybe two we don't assume are spiritual practices, but they're probably the most important spiritual practices in our current age, which are nature and our body. If all else fails, friends, and you've probably done this, you don't need to bring me from Minneapolis to invite you into this spiritual practice. If all else fails, and you're in the midst of trying to figure out where's God at in your life right now, what is God inviting you to, what do? You go for a walk. Nature is always there. Nature is one of the most revelatory, if not the, aside from Scripture itself. And so nature is always inviting us into that look and listening and lingering. In fact, one of the practices I write about in my recent book is go take a walk and receive a scene in nature, an object or scene, and let it be like an icon for you. Just one picture, just one. Something is asking for your attention, you have no reason why. Receive it as a picture, and then look at it as if it's an icon. It's got something to reveal to you. And listen with that picture. What part of this object or scene seems to be speaking to you? And if so, what is it inviting you into? Let the mystery unfold. Just linger with it. So nature is a profound practice, one we often underestimate because it seems so obvious. How can this be a spiritual practice? It's a profound practice. Let me talk about the body, because the 17-year-old Diane had no idea about the body, how important the body is as a spiritual practice. The body. When I was 25 years old and starting graduate school, I started getting this ache in the center of my chest. And I started meeting with a spiritual director, and I said, it feels like there's something slicing within me. What it was is I was developing an ulcer. I was developing an ulcer because I was trying to finish my master's degree in a year, because I was so eager to teach, I wanted to get out there. I really wound down over the years, but as you can hear from the 17-year-old and 25-year-old, in any event, that was my first experience with something's amiss. I noticed something in my body. Years later, when I had a new role, a role that ended up not being a good fit for my body as an administrator, I began to get shoulder aches. And they didn't go away. I could get a massage, I could do yoga, I could do all the things to do, and they didn't go away. And when something persists like that, that's our body speaking to us. Just like when our body feels light and enlivened, that's our body speaking to us. But when things feel as they're weighing us down. And recently, I was in the midst of a decision. I had been invited to write another book for a publisher, and at one point I was excited about it, but then they wanted to fast track it and get it out during the pandemic. And as I read the email, there was an instantaneous, it's like my shoulders were inflamed. And I knew at that moment it was so instantaneous and it was so connected to what I was looking at in that moment that was a sign to me. I cannot say yes to this at this time. So you all have your own embodied ways of knowing when your body's saying yes, when your body's saying no, maybe when your body's saying wait. And if you're not aware of those, just pay attention to your body as it interfaces with experiences. And notice what enlivens and lightens the body, and notice what weighs the body down. Okay, let me just briefly talk about, we're going to do some work this afternoon with imagination. So I'll just ask you, I'll build up a little suspense. We'll look at the role of imagination and discernment more fully this afternoon. As memories arise, I just illustrated for you with my story of the 17-year-old girl. That was a profound memory that returned to me, and I continue to draw upon, because I see, in fact, how much my relationship with God has changed over the years. So when memories arise out of nowhere, there's a fancy term for it. It's called passive receptivity. You're not trying to make it happen. They arise. Pay attention to those. Look at those memories. Listen to them. Linger with them. They're there for a reason. They're there. They're a source of guidance from God in those memories. I think many of us know what we mean by intuition. We just have a sense of knowing. This feels right to me. When I heard from Jane inviting me to come to Spokane, I knew that was something I could not say no to. Just intuitively, I thought, this is going to be a lot of fun. It got more fun. It just got nothing but more fun. But there was just this intuitive, yes, I want to say, right, I just have this sense of knowing. I want to talk about, I think many of us know about reason. This is kind of the pros and cons list. So, should I take this job? I'm offered a new job. Should I take this new job or not? My son draws upon or soon-to-be 30-year-old son, Ryan, draws upon reason a lot. When he was deciding which college to go to, he set up his pros and cons list, and then he weighted the factors. Like a location, he ended up going to Washington, D.C. Well, that location meant more to him than staying at a school in Minnesota, for instance. So we list both the pros and cons, and then we weigh them out, and then we sit with it. We don't necessarily instantaneously say, yes, let's go to Washington. We sit, we lean into a direction, and it looks like, based on the pros and cons, that a decision to go to a school in, Washington here is Washington State. This was Washington, D.C. It looks like I'm being called to go to school in Washington, D.C. So you sit with it. And you notice, now here's where feelings come in, and they couple up with reason. And he noticed, are you feeling a sense of deep peace and joy about this? Or after you've made this decision, are you noticing some apprehension? So we use both our reasoning and our feelings as a spiritual practice of discernment. And we can talk a bit more about that throughout the day. So this is our wheel. Do you recognize yourself in this wheel? Can you name how you discern, and maybe which of these buckets on the Ferris wheel, which of these practices you draw upon? And maybe you've been introduced to one, maybe you've thought, I really haven't paid that much attention to memory. Or maybe I'm not paying as much attention to my body as a source of discernment practice as I might. So notice which you draw upon, and maybe notice one you don't draw upon as much that you might want to incorporate and experiment with. These are some of the practices. So here again, to make this simple, there are so many books, there are so many lists, there are so many specifics, it boggles my mind. Do you ever feel that way when you're learning? Okay, as a cook, I will confess, 5 ingredients or 5 steps. And I think that's how I try to design presentations and ideas. What we know from learning theory is that our minds chunk things, and after a certain point, 7 items or more, we lose track. Our minds start swimming. That happens to me in the kitchen a lot, by the way. That's why I'm so grateful my husband enjoys cooking. But so I like to think about God, as St. Augustine said, is a lover, inviting Jesus as the beloved in all of us who follow Jesus. We are God's beloved. And then the Spirit is love, right? So lover, beloved, love. All we're doing is, rather than that song, remember that song in the 70s, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places? What we're doing in discernment is looking for love in all those places where love shows up. That's what discernment is. We're looking for it, we're listening to the voice of love, or for the voice of love, and we're lingering with it. Does that make sense? So let me just unpack these briefly, and within each of these there's going to be less talking on my part and a little more you engaging. I'm just looking at our time here. A little more of you engaging with a reflection related to each of these. All right. When I talk about looking, I talk about a point of conversion. We live in a driven culture. You're listening from a woman who was very good at being driven. I suspect many of you in the room, if not all of you, share that with me. Driven to accomplish, driven to serve God, driven. Can you relate? And I'd like to invite us to shift our way of seeing, rather than what we're driven to what we're drawn to. Because if we think of love, love is not a compulsive. Love is invitation. Love is invitation. It's free will. So as God reaches out and calls to Moses, I've set before you today, here's the options: life and love and prosperity, or death and adversity. Choose life. What is life-giving? That's the discernment question. In this moment, what's the most life-giving choice? What's the most love-giving and receiving choice in this moment? We don't need books for that, do we? Our heart, our intellects can help guide us into that response. Choosing life, choosing love. Oh, you know what? I need to say something. Please let me show you, because images speak volumes. Early in the pandemic, I found myself, as I was walking about our neighborhood, we're in downtown Minneapolis along the riverfront, and I was fascinated by the trees as we moved into spring. And for whatever reason, I was drawn to take pictures of the new life emerging in the trees. Remember where we were at in March, in April, and May? There were no clear signs or indications of new life. We didn't know where we were, other than we were, what was the term? In place. Isolating, yes, quarantining, that's the word I would say, in place. And so that image gave me hope. That image gave me hope. I'm always looking deeply within to where are the signs of life, because we all have situations we're discerning where on the outside there seem to be no signs of new life or more love. So then we have to look more deeply. Where are even the smallest indications of life? Where are the indications that love is inviting us, love is luring us to respond and to follow its call? So here we have it. The action of God is an invitation to life and love. It's a drawing rather than being driven. So let's first talk about driven. We feel we don't have a choice. We should do this. When we hear ourselves hearing, we should do that this is usually an indicator that it's a compulsion underneath rather than a response to love. We have to do this. Are your bodies feeling it? Do you feel the sensations of constriction? And it's fear. It's fear. Now, I know there are things that we may feel we have no choice about. I'm thinking of a dear friend of mine. She's the only child. Her parents are aging and ailing. Someone needs to care for those parents, and it happens to be her. And she's just starting a new job. She does feel she has no choice. But even in the midst of that, even in the midst of those limited choices and great responsibilities, she did notice she needed to find some other resources for support. So she talked with her parents and she said, will you agree with me that we can draw upon other types of support? And she received their consent. So even when we're in situations where the choices may appear limited, can we explore then what might be the choices? Although not as expansive as sometimes in life, there still may be choices we just haven't considered. There's a sense of rightness, we might even say lightness, and goodness of fit. This is the kind of thing we cannot say no to. It seems like second nature. And there we see peace and joy at the foundation. So even in the midst of, now here's the difference. On the external part of our lives, on the surface, we are still in a very tumultuous time. Let's not kid ourselves. Even though people may say, oh, the pandemic's over, it's still a very tumultuous time, is it not? There's still a lot of uncertainty, not only with relation to the pandemic. So that's on the external of our lives. But what we're always paying attention to is what's happening in the depths of our heart. That's where we want to pay attention to the rightness, the goodness of fit. What are the feelings happening? We experience challenges here. I have a directee right now. She's in a position, it's just not going the way she thought it would. So I'm always inviting her, okay, that's what's happening externally, structurally, what's happening in the depths internally. That's another dimension we're going to look at here. Do you find this helpful? This I find personally helpful, where I'm trying to notice where I'm being driven and where I'm being drawn. And just to remind one another, the action of God in our lives is always a drawing to greater love. Okay, I don't think I'm going to have a chance to tell this story as fully as I like to, but this was a picture that my husband and I took when we were at Walden Pond in Concord, Massachusetts. The reason I share this picture is because I want to tell you about the experience of Henry David Thoreau, who most of us probably studied at some point in our careers or our education. And here's a young man who felt, because he wanted to be a writer, where are writers driven to go? What's one of the main places writers are driven to go? They should know to come to Spokane because it's such a peaceful, nourishing container. But most of them go to nature. Well, he didn't go to nature. He learned that. He went to New York City. Because if you want to glitter in the literary scene, both in his time, in the mid-19th century, and in our time, you go to New York City. That's where they make it or break it, so to speak. And so he went to New York City. And even though he had this freshly minted degree from Harvard and yada, 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 he was not accepted there. In fact, his 2 years there, was he even there 2 years? Less than 2 years. He published one book review. He wasn't accepted in the social circles. People didn't see what he had to offer was of value. So he followed that driven path. And then, in the face of that rejection, in the face of that pain, in the face of those dashed expectations, he turned to noticing where he was drawn. And it was the memories of the woods at Concord, which drew him, and as he reflected upon that, he wrote his first essay, which eventually became one of the essays in Walden. So he returned here, he built a home, he began writing. You know the rest of the story. He ended up being what? That's one of the best-selling books. Now, as some friends reminded me in another retreat, well, his recent biographies say his mom brought him sandwiches, and that his parents lived a mere, really wasn't that grand of a courageous, daring experiment with unconventional being drawn life because mom brought him sandwiches. And you know what I say to that? We all need people who bring us sandwiches. Yeah, we need people. If we're going to take these unconventional steps and follow where we're being drawn, we need community, whether they bring sandwiches or in this case a banana. We need that, right? So, yes. You probably have heard this, so I will read it to you. But the intent was not, but thank you. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. Thank you for asking, yes. So he's trying to step into, see if I could learn to live a way of life where I'm being drawn. Yes. Oh, let's try that. Thank you. Does that help? Yeah, I think it's the type, I think I didn't do a large enough on the picture. So one of the prayers I lean into that helps me to practice this way of life of following that to which I'm drawn rather that to which I'm driven is a prayer by Sister Joyce Rupp. She does a lot of writing, especially she's very well known within Catholic circles. And in this book, Fragments of Your Ancient Name, she's trying to increase our imagery of God rather than the old man in the sky. What are other ways we might name the divine? And so she's got 365 of these. It's really nice. It's so exciting. And as a director, I like to draw upon these in meeting with directees because I think we're all trying to expand our God imagery. And so this is one image she uses. And for me, I just return to it and return to it. And it's the image of the divine magnet. And by the way, if you want to take pictures of any of these slides, please go ahead if you'd like to have this particular prayer. We can make the, we absolutely can. That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So divine magnet, draw me toward your love. Attract me to what really counts. Pull me away from distractions that keep my heart unfocused. Let there be a strong connection between your presence and mine so that in each aspect of life, because remember, the calling isn't just about occupation or family, it's each aspect of life God is calling. I stay closely in touch with you. I love this. Captivate my heart. Captivate my heart so completely that I continually return to you. So, as you stand at the crossroads, right? As we read in the book of Jeremiah, we stand at the crossroads. As you stand at the crossroads in your life at this moment, where is it you believe you are being drawn to greater love, to greater life? And where is it you are being driven? Is the question clear? Where is it you are being drawn? And where is it you feel as if you are being driven? So I'm feeling a little bit driven because I have so much I want to share with you, and I see it's almost time for a break. So what I'm going to do is, let's see, what are we, about 12 after? I'd love for us, let's take 2 or 3 minutes and let's just hold this question quietly and notice what emerges. If you find it helpful to write, I invite you to write. Some of you just like to have the time to just sit and chillax with the question and notice what emerges. But before we leave for break, just take a moment to ask yourself. And maybe you're more aware of where you're being driven. And that wouldn't be surprising because we have such a driven culture in which we live. Where are you being drawn? Where are you being driven? And let me, because I won't have the gift of being able to check in with each of you, how many of you noticed a draw? At least one thing to which you're being drawn. Okay. How many of you noticed something to which you feel you're being driven? All right, friends, I want to honor the need our bodies have for rest and movement and break. And so I don't know if anything needs to be said about so I'm going to adapt the question. I'm going to adapt our time a little bit. I want to continue with this, and I'm just going to take a bit out of the small group time. So we'll do an abbreviated small group. Some of you may be saying, "Woo, yay, I'm drawn to that idea, Diane." So we're going to do an abbreviated small group this morning. Don't worry, we'll have a full immersion experience this afternoon. So, but I want to continue with these ideas before we go there. Yes. So 15 minutes, please, we'll return at 10:30 and pick up. And one thing I want to say is what really brings me a lot of joy, and one of the things I don't get to experience when I meet on Zoom, is the ad hoc conversations that appear, right? When you're on Zoom, you can't just get out and talk as easily as you can when we're in a room like this. So I really love to hear what's moving in you or if questions are emerging, and that's why I'm here. So please feel free to just come up and tap me on the shoulder during these break times or during lunch or as they arise. All right, have a good break. I'll see you at 10:30.